Well, welcome back to the Edge Report. I've got Kelly Colon again, who's becoming somewhat of a repeat offender on this podcast. Kelly, how are you today?
I am good. I'm good. Before we hit record, I think I answered the question of I haven't killed anybody today, which if that is the basis of, start of your day, I think I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, and I think I said to you, the day is still young. I'm still drinking coffee, so there's plenty of time for axe murdering for the rest of the day. Well, Kelly, listen. So let's just jump right in. I was at the All Things Open conference last week in Raleigh, which is an open source tech conference. And then you were at Cornet Symposium, I think, in Washington, D.C. So I love to come back together after two very different conferences and have discussions. We did that with Steve Worley and Lori Rothenberg, a few months ago, where we were all sort of in different places and we came back together and compared notes. And that's really what I wanted to do today. You sort of broke the internet yesterday on LinkedIn, doing what you do best and saying how you feel about your experience at the conference. So let's have a conversation around that, right? It started with you feeling like there was some letdown of conversation. Maybe I don't want to put words into your mouth. You posted it. So why don't we have a discussion about what you did at Cornet in DC, and then we'll talk about what I did in Raleigh at All Things Open.
Yeah, I think I'll start by saying, this is the world we came from, right? Construction, real estate, Cornet, IFMA, BOMA. This was, for lack of a better word, this was my family, right? This is who helped sort of grow me to the person I am today. And so, I think like all families who have challenges, right? Coming together sounds great for the holidays, but then, halfway through, you're like, I wish I didn't come home. So it had a very similar feel to me. I was excited to go back because the theme was really, it was kind of an anomaly for a real estate conference, right? The theme was fueling human connection. And I was like, wow, great. The crazy uncle, right, is like going to have a normal conversation at Thanksgiving, right? So I got very excited about attending, thinking that, this very traditional organization that essentially helped grow me to be the person I was kind of stepping out of their comfort zone, for lack of a better word. 2 years ago, when they were in Chicago, it was very preachy and very much RTO and get everyone back to the office. And this is, remote work and hybrid's not going to last. And, it was the feeling at that time was very fear-based. I didn't go to Denver. I understand it was not wildly attended, so I don't have comment for that. But given my history with the organization, I said, oh, this is really exciting. We're going to actually talk about the things that really matter, human connections, human beings. Because you and I have had this conversation. It's people, platform, and place. And we have a people problem. We don't have a place problem. We have a people problem. And none of this other stuff matters until we talk about the people problem. And so, for years I've been saying this, and I had so much hope. I got on that plane. Plus, I was bringing a former student of mine. And so it was really her coming out party, right? Her very first conference ever. She just graduated in May. It was her first opportunity to speak into a large crowd. And so,
cool.
I went into it really hopeful and excited. And then I got there and I was just very underwhelmed and frustrated by the content that was being offered, and the lack of actual meaningful human connection as it pertains to the content. Now, networking was great. I saw a lot of people I love, got to put my arms around people I haven't seen in a couple of years. And, there's always that's amazing. But when it comes down to the conference, I was wildly disappointed and frustrated.
Yeah. Well, you did a pretty good job explaining sort of what was missing too in your post, right? You mentioned that there was no discussion. I have your post open here in front of me. No discussion on trauma, PTSD, or anxiety, right? So, for me, post Helene, so much of my work for the last 45 days has been recovery. So much of my work has been inventory taking and support. It's empathy, empathy, empathy. Like, what do you need? And that ranges from like, I need a bottle of water to I need a hug to everything is gone to whatever, right? So like, that is a workplace. There is a massive impact on real estate. Entire cities and towns are gone. And that is something that is on the forefront of Western North Carolina right now, is trauma-informed PTSD response to workplace. These places, people's workplaces are wiped off the map. They don't even have a workplace. So like, you know, there is such a lack of holistic understanding around that piece of it, the wellness piece of work, you know, and it's just, it boggles my mind. So yeah, the PTSD and trauma for post-traumatic growth, huge right now, coming soon to a theater near you, by the way, because we're seeing more and more climate events. We're going to see more flooding. We're going to see more wildfires. We're going to see, and all of that has a huge impact on urban planning. It has an impact on design. It has an impact on construction and
Chris,
AECO.
it's almost 80 degrees in Boston today. It is November 5th.
Right. So you see the circularity of it, because and that's the beauty of it, right? So that's one. And then, you know, and your passion, the reason that you stepped out and went on your own and took that leap of faith was neurodiversity and neuroinclusion.
Yeah.
So let alone being empathetic around PTSD and trauma-informed wellness, how about the fact that people present in different ways?
Right.
Right? So like, we're talking about workplace in terms of like color and texture and light. That's, physical environment is important, but like, we got to do a better job picking away at people.
Well, and there was some comments that I received both privately and directly on the post around, you know, that there were conversations that were had, right? That we did talk about some of these things. And while that may have happened, it was ad hoc at best and superficial. I mean, there were no sessions that we really talked about this piece of the equation, right? And it's, how do you foster human connection if you don't understand human beings and what's going on right now? They had a session, and you know that Rex is one of my favorite humans in the planet. Lori was a panelist on this in this particular breakout session, and
Rex Miller, Lori Rothenberg, for listeners that don't know, they're definitely friends of the podcast.
Yeah, and they're two of my favorite people. I mean, I adore them, and they did a great job on the panel discussion. But the panel was about the psychology of the office, and I went. Had Rex and Lori not been on the panel, I absolutely would have not attended, just out of sheer avoidance, because it was the wrong thing. But I went in support of them because I adore both of them.
Right.
They did a great job. But it was that exact thing that I walked out of there and I was like, we're having the wrong conversations. Like, this is, it's not about the office. Like, there's psychology. It's an intangible thing. We're talking about psychology of humans. Like, you put that in the title of the conference. And so I actually, if you talk to people, I'm assuming, because I saw a lot of people, but I really didn't engage in, I was invited to all the parties and all the dinners and all the, ego stroking stuff. And I was like, I'm not interested in titles or status, because if we're going to be talking about things, I want to have hard conversations. Like, anxiety is a problem. The fact that, they brought this amazing, I will say there's one company they brought in that, they're local to Boston, and they were amazing. It's called Art Lifting.
Yep.
And
I know that company.
Yeah, and Liz had all of her, her artists. They were live painting and live creating, and I spent more than probably a third of my time talking to the artists, because
there's a company down here called Gokata here in Charlotte, and she's awesome. She came from commercial real estate. It's about bringing real art it's part of the built environment, but it's far more on the human centric side.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It was just, that was the most inspiring thing I think I took away, was just learning more about that company. They're right here in Boston, getting to physically have conversations with the artists that were there, hear their stories. I mean, that was very inspiring, which I really loved.
Mhm.
So, it wasn't all doom and gloom. I was disheartened because, you know, in our panel that we had, but that kind of showcased and highlighted our students, was really around what are the skills that these emerging leaders need to be having? What are some of the gaps in their education as they're emerging? Like, how should we be supporting these young humans as they're emerging into this industry? So
Yes.
we talked a little bit about, in my panel, about sort of that topic, and someone asked me about neurodiversity, and we don't need a book, we don't need a published book, we don't need a manual. Like, you just think about a framework, right? And you and
Mhm.
I have talked about this.
Yeah, no, burn the books, burn the maps,
Burn them.
like
They don't do
explore
anything.
explore more.
Yes, throw them away. Look like a compass, right? And I said, if we think about a framework, that's right. Look at, I believe in it so much, I have it tattooed on my arm.
I keep it right next to me,
Mm-hmm.
right here,
Yep.
because it's a wayfinding tool.
I have mine right here, literally, in case I ever need it. And then I've got another one back here on my dresser,
Yeah.
right? It's just, it has, we don't need a playbook. We need people who are willing to explore and be uncomfortable and have these hard conversations. And so I said, when we think about what you're trying to do, advocacy, agency, when we're thinking, those are action. That's taking action and doing something.
Mhm.
But if you do that in the absence of really understanding and being aware, and then
Mhm.
accepting that this is what we have to do, whether you want to or not, like, you have to have awareness, you have to have acceptance before you can take action. It can't be the other way around. And
Mhm.
because right now everyone wants to just take action.
Yeah.
They want to,
Force. Remember, we that was yesterday. It was like you did the AI thing with the person in the megaphone screaming into the flower.
yep,
This is emergence, and this is what I've been studying with regenerative systems and
right,
circular systems. Natural systems don't have roadmaps.
yep,
Natural systems emerge. There's a pattern that
mm-hmm,
you can look at, but these circular systems are patterns, and it takes observation. Observation takes awareness and curiosity. And these are the things that are missing from the conversations that you and I have been sharing
mm-hmm,
at various conferences across the country. I've stopped specifically going to commercial real estate um, conferences in the last 5 years. If they don't have a theme beyond CRE, it's just not where I'm going. I'm not exploring that right now.
yeah,
So, like, I was in Denver at Cornett. I was at Symposium last year. I was in Chicago. I did not go this year for several reasons. One was that I said this conference season, I was going to all different types of conferences.
yeah,
I was going to people conferences, I was going to environmental conferences, and I was going to technology conferences. And
yeah,
not pre-tech or prop tech, technology open source, technology decentralized systems. Um, and it's super important because it goes to people, platform, and place,
mm-hmm,
right? If we're going to talk about a holistic workplace, and we're going to talk about emergent systems, and we're going to incorporate AI, and we're going to incorporate supercomputing, we're going to
mm-hmm,
incorporate fusion power, new power systems in this world. The way we used to do a roadmap is not the way forward.
no,
We have to explore humans and explore the platforms available to humans. Those are the tools that allow them to do their work.
yeah,
And that's the most important part. Everybody thinks that economics is getting in the way. We're getting in the way of economics because we're slowing down the deals. The reality is that we're jettisoning economics by giving people platforms that are better informed to get their job done.
mm-hmm.
We'll get back to where they do it when it's time.
We're not
It's
there
not
yet.
time to talk about
No,
where it gets done.
No.
And that's why I get so passionate about this. It's like the same thing with Helene and disaster recovery. Going back and building exactly what you had there before is a really bad idea. We can't rebuild what was there before, but yet there's this emergence of time, this human construct of time, and I get it. People want to get back to some sort of normal, but there is no more normal. It's new.
No.
It's different. So anyway, sorry, I got to get off my horse there for a second.
No, but that is exactly the frustration that I had. It's like, I walked around probably most of Saturday afternoon, kind of in disbelief and shock. Like, is it 2024? Like, I'm physically here. I'm interacting with the environment and the people, but somehow I feel like it's 1990. Like, this is absurd. Like, what the hell are we doing?
Mhm.
And, it's like this micro session for 50 minutes, and then that micro session for 50 minutes, and then this 20-minute, quick talk in some innovation hub. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, the buzzwords.
We have really smart people in this room at this conference. We have people who have, power to make decisions and real change. And we're wasting 20 precious minutes listening to nonsense that actually isn't going to move the needle. And I was just like, what are we, like, collectively, what are we still doing? And Saturday afternoon, I got so frustrated. I actually walked out. I walked down to Ben and Jerry's, got myself a giant, coffee ice cream with espresso chips. I sat in an Adirondack looking at the harbor, put my earphones in, and just listened and meditated and enjoyed the sun because I was like, I think that was the hardest part, honestly, selfishly. I was surrounded by people who affectionately helped me become the person I am. And I stood in this giant crowd and realized I am completely alone in this environment. And that was really, really hard to be like, my family, right? The affectionate family that helped me grow professionally. I can't take them with me where I'm going. Like, they can't be part of this journey. I'm completely alone in this sea of people that I admire and trust and respect. And I think when I was sitting in the Adirondack chair, blissfully eating my ice cream, I'm not gonna lie, I was crying. I was like, I'm all alone. This is absurd. And it was really hard. I mean, there was a lot of emotion as I was sitting there because, I have hope and faith that we are going to figure this out. That it's not there, and it's not in 20-minute micro sessions, and it's not in 1 hour panel discussions about shit that doesn't matter.
Yes. Well, let me brighten your day a little bit. You are not alone.
Thank you. I do know that.
You have an emergent group of people that are solving problems around you. In the business world, you have to make things make sense for business.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily equate to the work you're doing. The work you're doing right now it's societal.
Yeah.
It's community based. And it is emergent. The problem is also that, and you and I have talked about this, it's also in business terms, product market fit and timing to market.
Right.
You are absolutely ahead of the industry in terms of the way you're thinking holistically about, let's just use the word office.
Yeah.
Work, really. And that's where I am. I'm trying to get way farther away from the built environment. We all work. Workplaces are occupations, how we spend our time.
Right.
If the machines are going to continue to learn and neural nets are going to continue to get smarter, we have to be more human. and less machine-like.
Yeah.
Yet in the built environment, we were part of a cog of a machine. And we all had an important part to play in developing or delivering or producing the finished product. But it's a machine and it's mechanized. And that is going to fall apart. You can only put so much horsepower. You can only bore out so much more power, energy in a machine.
Yeah.
And now it needs to reemerge. And I think it has. And I think that, that was my comment to you yesterday, is that we've bifurcated.
Yeah.
The industry is bifurcated. And there's I call it placemaking and space making, and that gets people confused. But to me, workspace is like your headspace. It's computers in front of you. It's this, right? This is my space. And the people that are working on this type of stuff are really moving the needle.
Yeah.
And they're really influencing placemakers, because when we come back, we're going to be so programmatic. We're going to be so programmatic that it's going to be like, how do you work?
Right.
Like when you ask that question, it's like profound, right? Not like, where do you do it? Like, well, do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Like the people on the platform are going to move the needle and then inform the placemakers, again, of square footage and type and use and term and, all the things. So, anyway.
Even AI, right? Like even if we step outside of the more humanities side of kind of the work I do, right? I am not a technological person, but even conversations around AI, which I know a little bit about, teach my students about, I use every single day. Colliers, I believe it was, stood on the main stage and puts these, slides up with all these sexy statistics about AI. And I was like, oh my God. Like, and everyone is I'm in the back and I'm watching the faces of people. I'm like,
Were they eating it up?
like Kool-Aid, like a chocolate, like a kid on Halloween just eating all the chocolate. And I was like, no one is even looking to the margins. No one even understands the impact of what they're looking at. And I'm like, and it does directly impact their industry, right? I mean, AI takes energy.
Oh my God, don't get me started.
It takes so much energy. And yet there was no discussion about sustainability. There was no discussion about energy.
Water?
There was no discussion about the fact that Microsoft is powering up 3 Mile Island, why all of these big tech companies are investing in nuclear power. Why? Why are they doing that? Look to the margins, because energy is a scarce resource. And we've seen by detrimental events like Helene, how quickly our energy source can be completely upended, which will change how people are going to build. And then, you look at sort of where the power is distributed in the US, and we have a problem. We have a massive infrastructure problem. But everyone wants to talk about how AI is going to impact lease negotiations. And I was like, I'm out. I can't do this anymore.
Like, yeah, you just double clicked on a lot of stuff that gets my tail wagging.
Like, what are we doing? I'm sitting, Chris, and I'm watching it, and everyone's like, yeah, this is great. Lease negotiations. And I was like, all of you people are going to be out of a job. None of you have any idea what you're talking. And I was just, I sat there and and again, I wasn't getting angry. Honestly, my heart was breaking. Like, I was sitting there watching the industry I spent 25 years. My first memory was a 5-year-old little girl was jumping out of my family's pickup truck with a hard hat that was too big for my head and was wobbly on my head because I was going to a construction site, and immediately getting yelled at because I showed up with flip-flops on it. And I had forgotten my sneakers.
Violation.
Right? Like, I mean, this world is part of my DNA. And I just sat in this environment, and it kind of overwhelmed me that it's all broken. Like they're clapping over how AI is going to impact lease negotiations. And I was like, how about the world? How about the US? How about the fact that we are going to be leveraging nuclear power to support AI that is going to absolutely impact how businesses are going to be operating both on-prem and in the cloud. Like companies aren't just going to be relying on the cloud anymore. People are going to start to be bringing in stuff on-prem to support their internal AI processes, which is why everyone wants power, which is going to absolutely change programmatically where people are going to be putting places, how they build them, because, oh, FYI, where's the energy? Right in the middle of the US.
Yeah, let me tap on that a little bit because I started doing some research. Did you know that a traditional 10 prompt exchange with AI,
Yep.
like you going out and having a quick conversation with AI,
Yep.
uses a bottle of water,
I love
one
keep going.
bottle of water.
I love this. Yep.
So people are talking about energy. We have renewables. We have high value ecological economics. We have the answer for the power. We really do. And that's where a lot of people are going to disagree. Like we're going to get to fusion, and we're going to get like the NREL, the renewable research lab in Denver. Just read what they're working on, right?
Yep.
And I started to now understand EVs and the value proposition of EVs. And we'll get into that a different time or maybe off of here because, I don't like to talk about things that get political because I just think it's a waste of energy.
Yep.
But we're using in our data centers as much as 2 million liters of water a day. And this is phase change water. This is water that comes in and cools and evaporates.
Yep.
What do you think is causing flash storms? I think it's water. I think it's water vapor.
Talk about AI and how it's going to impact lease negotiations.
Right. So maybe what we should talk about is AI and data centers and how it's going to impact fresh water levels and potentially increase water vapor,
which is going to have environmental
which is
impact.
going to have environmental impact, which is going to cause destruction, which means new code, which means new insurance, which means new urban planning. So like the very way we build have to be reconsidered.
Where we build, how we build.
Right.
Yes.
So that's the other side of it is access and awareness of the circularity of components, right? Like I love a data center. I'm a tech guy. I understand computational values. I see where things are going quantum. I love physics and phase changes and seeing how technology gets supported, both from an infrastructure perspective and from a software and application perspective. One of the things that I spent the most amount of time at during my conference was what they call DPINs, DEPINS. It's decentralized physical infrastructure networks. When you and I were in Austin, we met with Michael Shear in his work with the Autonomy Institute. The decentralized physical infrastructure also has elements of national security associated with it because you've got distributed nodes. So you have a more resilient grid when you're decentralized. So all of the things that we're seeing post-COVID, us, food systems, supply chains, networks are decentralized. And we're living with a reemergence. We're starting to understand by observing and orienting to that systems thinking, how things can reemerge.
Right.
If we're thinking. And that's how I see things now. I'm working on 2 businesses right now that don't have business plans at all. And it's like the hardest and craziest thing for me to do, but I'm letting them emerge because I'm letting their time happen.
Yeah.
Like I would let a seed grow. You can't shout at a plant. You can't shout at a flower. It has to emerge.
No. I mean, there were some sessions around like employee engagement, like human engagement. And it was all around like the physical environment, like create sensory inclusive environments. And I was like, no, none of does anyone understand what that means? Like as a human being who is completely dysregulated. And I will give you an example. During our session, we had major AV problems. Okay. And it sounded like, hard to explain. It sounded kind of like a plane was landing while elephants were jumping on the roof, on the ceiling of the place we're at.
Okay.
It was something weird with the AV, and it started out slow and low, and then it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, you know that I'm neurodivergent, and my brain hears shit that other people don't hear. Okay. That's just like on the regular. Okay. And for years, I just thought that like that's how people like could. I mean, I can remember walking in a facility and being like, that ballast is about to blow. And everyone's like, how do you know that? And I was like, make sure we order that. We're going to have to get an electrician in here. That'll be blown by next week. And people are like, what is wrong? Because I can hear it before anybody else could even, because my brain is weird. And so I, for like probably 10 minutes, thought it was in my head until it got so loud. I could physically see the discomfort on the audience members. And I was like, okay, so that's not in my head. That you guys are hearing that too. Right. I mean, and it would have been, for someone who was less aware, who maybe didn't have the level of training that I had, that could absolutely have completely dysregulated someone. And actually, a couple people did leave the room. Now we know why, but at the time, they just left. And so, people want to talk about engagement, but they don't want to talk about humans. Like, how do you work on connecting with another person and getting them engaged in whatever it is that you want to do, whether it is, communicating, innovating, brainstorm, it doesn't matter what it is. You can't get people engaged if you don't understand people. I mean, it's just, I sat through that session on engagement and I was like, the content wasn't there. I mean, it was well intended, but I was like, this actually gave me nothing. And it's 50 minutes of my life I'll never get back.
Well, yes, but let's again let's talk about the fertile environment for a minute, because in emergence and in regenerative thinking, sometimes you can't shout the plant into a bloom, but you can provide the environment that is beyond suitable, maybe even perfect. And that's what's crazy, is that like at my farm, the soil structure, is the most important. Microbiome of the soil is the most important thing. And the energy and the power is already in the seed.
Right.
So if I have a really good quality seed and I have really good fertile quality soil, naturally fertile, by the way, I can plant that seed and let it emerge, and it will
On its
grow
own
root.
time.
You have to give it its period, and it will take time. So some of the other things, like Rex's work is amazing. Like he's been on a tear lately. Like I don't know, like he and I talked. We did a podcast that he's going to do on the Resilient Lab, for his Resilient Lab, and potentially move on to Imagine a Place or one of the other larger podcast things, which is awesome. But he's been like everywhere, just bringing people up, right? Amplifying. That's like Rex's new word for me.
Amplifying.
Like he's just amplifying everybody's cause. And one of the best events that you went to so far was the Tarquette event. Let's talk about Jonathan and his work. Because here's the difference, right? You came back, you called me from there.
I did.
Like you weren't sitting on a Adirondack chair crying.
No.
You called me from there and you were like, holy crap. Like, so let's talk about that now. Let's talk about that environment and what's happening with the emergence of what he's working.
So essentially, for those who don't have context, right? So essentially, Tarquette is putting together these sort of symposiums, I guess, for lack of a better word. I don't want to dare to use the word conference because that just doesn't do it justice. It's more like a symposium. And every year they choose a different sort of set of topics per se. And this year they hosted it in Austin, and it was really mostly around education, which, is kind of a big affinity of mine. It's sort of my first love. And so it was really around what do we need to do to think about the future of education?
Mm-hmm.
Inclusion, how we measure, programmatically students' growth. How do we support students, not just, in a physical environment, which was a big part of it. We had designers in the room. I mean, we did talk about the physical learning environment. But we also talked about the social emotional learning, the skills that students need to have. We talked about, the sort of legislatures and the governing bodies, right? Like, where do things shift? Where do we need to see more growth? So it was really around the future of education, with kind of the high level summary for this year's sort of symposium. What they did is they looked to the ether and they said, what are the big rocks? Like, what problems do we have as it pertains to this particular topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our physical environments in an education, K through 12, higher ed, our physical environments are on fire, right? Our social emotional learning, how we measure learning, on fire. How we support cognitively different students, on fire, right? So they looked and said, what are the big rocks that are on fire, and who is involved with those rocks? Not who's doing everything, right? But who's involved with code? Who's involved with, being in a middle school classroom, right? So they brought in about 50 or 60 individual people. So small enough, was very intimate. We all got to know everyone. And there were superintendents, there were professors, there were designers, there were architects, there were teachers, there were social advocates, right? There was like a mayor or a governor or some legislative body was in there too.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought everyone together.
Mm-hmm.
And we were given presentations, we were given workshop opportunities, Rex presented. We had someone, I can't remember the name of it, we had a neuroscientist come in and talk about how the brain learns, right? And so it really, the entire thing was pulling together what one could on paper look like completely disjointed individuals that have no connection.
Yeah.
And brought everyone together to have real conversations. There were arguments, there were disagreements, there were people that, presented information that others sort of challenged. And then there were opportunities where we all rolled up our sleeves and said, all right, doesn't matter who's right or wrong. Like, how do we fix this? Like, what are some of the things we need to do to move the needle forward? Again, it was in an educational environment, but I think what was so radically different for me, it wasn't just the size, because, obviously they're different.
Totally.
It was the fact that you had seemingly disconnected humans recognize a larger wicked problem,
Mm-hmm.
understand that no one has the answer, and we're probably not going to find out the answer in 2.5 days, but we can start to have the meaningful conversations without ego, without any of that, without our own bias, in an environment that we can learn and grow and collaborate and maybe move the needle forward. And it was single-handedly one of the most inspiring things I have done this year.
Well, bravo. And, when I spoke with Jonathan yesterday and was introduced to the concept of what he's working on, it's tiny giants. It's multiplicative. He is taking these results to Washington.
Yeah.
So like that one was the design built environment discussion. That was that module.
So let's
There
just
were-
look at that. Target is a flooring manufacturer.
I know. That's why I love it, because so our conversation ended yesterday with he wants a validator. He wants a tool. He wants something that, we've been building the certification in the built environment. And certification, if we let the cat out of the bag, is paying for a name, put a basically a plaque on a building, and it certifies. That's fine. But like in building science, the building has to perform.
Right.
So it needs to perform to something. There has to be a measure of data. The building has to actually hold its thermal value, or you can put blower doors on houses because you can test air compression and that sort of thing. Indoor air quality should be like a standard.
Yep.
It should, the way that we build should improve the health of the occupants, right? All of that kind of thinking. But what blew me away with his work, what he explained to me yesterday, was that I think that was his third, maybe.
Yeah,
And
third one.
he and Rex kind of, this is sort of, they work back and forth on this. And I don't, again, one conversation isn't enough for me to have written a page of notes. But the goal is results oriented.
Right.
So it goes back to business. It goes back to the econometrics associated with doing things the right way. It's
Right.
not just a discussion. And it is in many ways more of an experiment than anything else. You have a hypothesis, and then you're going to have some sort of a deliverable. Exactly. And they're going to take that deliverable on their waypoint to DC, north for me, south for you. And they're going to start to have meaningful discussions around how to propel the education system into something far more well, so that when you matriculate through the education system, you know how to navigate the emergence of leadership. When you get to the workplace, we're actually going to teach a new type of educational thought. And, you said it a million times in your post in the last 3 years or whatever, a cold room with command and control, sit forward, hard seats and, vinyl flooring and, hard walls. And that's not the way forward.
No.
And our kids are responding to those environments in not the most positive ways.
No.
And then generationally, we're saying, what's wrong with the kids? And most of us that work with kids are saying nothing's wrong with kids, because there's nothing wrong with the kids.
There's nothing wrong with them. They're responding to input, and the input we're providing them is terrible.
Well,
So,
50 style building, I mean, we can start there.
like, it's just, it's it's the most inspiring conversations that I've had because of that. Because it's like, they're not, Tarkat, Jonathan, they're not attacking these problems by saying and pointing fingers.
Right.
Right? There's no finger pointing. They're not saying this younger generation is lazy or stupid, or they're not pointing to, Gen Xers is saying they want to work from home, right? They're not doing this. They're saying, no, they're saying, let's pull our hands together and figure this out. There's no finger pointing. All we know is that there is a problem, and we have an option and an opportunity to help solve this problem in some meaningful way. And I think that kind of work clearly sort of sits with me. I mean, Jonathan and I have had this conversation, like, the school that I teach at now, Endicott, I mean, we have a brand new dean, an assistant dean, and they're amazing. And they're looking at the program and they're saying things like this, like, our students are ill prepared, to the point where they are redeveloping the entire business curriculum, and we are building out, like a fundamental social pragmatic where students are starting to learn some of these social skills and making that a degree requirement.
Yep.
Right? Making sociology and psychology classes, organizational behavior, human behavior, now part of the curriculum and not an elective, right? And so that's what I say. And on one hand, I get very hopeful because I'm seeing small micro movements in the right direction. And then, sometimes when, I have a quiet moment or I'm meditating, it's, it also can become really overwhelming because there's still so much work to do.
And our value has yet to have been created. So we need to look to people like Rex and, Jonathan's work with what he's doing with Tarkett. We need to look to their work to help us assign our value.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot in the industry where people are like, I can't work for free anymore.
Right.
Right. That's a market emerging.
Yeah.
That's determining market value. When we became an agrarian society and we got together at the market and I had excess and you had excess, we would get together and that would start it on a barter. That was the trade value, right? But our words, our minds, the shift that you and I made some years ago, I'm almost 5 years into mine now. You're
18.
2, yeah, almost 2 into yours. And you mentioned that when you got back from your conference too, like you're almost there. You're ahead of your time. Your value is not assigned. My value is not assigned. So we have to look to these leaders and sort of rewrite these contracts. Like I don't want to do, remember I told you before, like there's 3 things we have to have now. We got to have a good energy. We got to have synergy, and we have to have accountability.
Yep.
That I wrote a business proposal that had those 3 things written at the top of it and basically said, if you can't agree to these 3 things, then we can't work together.
Yeah.
And when I sent it over, I was so passionate. And as soon as I hit it, I'm like, that might have been the craziest effing thing I've ever done. Like literally said, the first 3 things that you have to agree to are your energy, synergy, and accountability. Because I can't do my work if people don't respond. If we can't engage in dialogue and we can't assemble the way that you just mentioned, we did that with the LCP up at Oak Hill. Yeah. Remember, James Young was sitting next to me, the banker. And James said, he stopped at the very end and he's like, I just figured out why I'm here. He said it out loud.
Yeah.
I could have cried. Like I fell over in my chair because that's exactly the point of what we were doing. I was assembling people to come together to bring their human self.
Yep.
And to rip up a wicked problem and to moderate the discussion so that we could write things down and get head shaking. Yeah. And everybody left with energy.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. It's like when you think about, I was also at a recent event that was hosted by Smith Group, this CAB, which is a very similar kind of event, much smaller scale than what Jonathan puts on with Tarkett. But they do it annually. I don't know how many years. I've gone to 3 of them. I don't know how long they've been doing it, but they typically bring in, there's probably 30 people maybe, and it's like half of the room is internal Smith Group people. The other half are, client, they call them client advisor folks. And it can be clients, it could be industry peers, whatever. And, even in those environments, it's like CAB environment, the stuff we were doing with Oak Hill. I was at at Rex's Ranch in May, right? Yep. And during this Smith Group thing, they had asked you to present to the crowd, like what were some of the milestones, right? Like we had to present like a little slide deck, like what were some of the highlights of your year so far? And it was so clear. Like it was these moments, it was these opportunities, like at Oak Hill, like, at Tarkett's event in Austin, like Rex's Ranch. It was these moments where we were actually having uncomfortable, hard conversations about moving the needle forward and trying to figure out how we collectively solve a problem, right? And it wasn't about how much money I made this year.
How
It
many
wasn't
deals? What about
how
how many
many
deals you
deals.
did?
Yeah, it wasn't, it wasn't about how much, you know, um, how many networking events I had gone to. Like, it wasn't about any of that. And so I sat and reflected, and I was like, there was only 3 or 4 events that made my year impactful. And that was really why. It was because we were in environments that we were unafraid to have hard conversations.
Yeah, authenticity is often overlooked, and vulnerability and authenticity, to me, vibrate on the same wavelength.
Mhm.
And Charlie Graham and I are doing this open innovation workshop where we're building a tool, right, called Polaris. It's an application. It's basically a network for ideas. It's where what we say is it's where ideas go to live, not to die.
Mhm.
And that's the hardest thing I've ever really done as an entrepreneur, is build an open source network for ideas as an application in technology. It's just not easy,
Yeah.
because you're talking to developers that are very logical and can solve problems very quickly, but it's such a nebulous concept. We're taking this nebulous concept of ideation and a network of ideas to have them live in perpetuity, so that they're not in an ephemeral post,
Right.
right? And also to be able to go back to that idea and track that it was your idea,
Mhm.
and not worry about the terms of service of LinkedIn or TikTok
Yep.
or whatever. I've got a friend, Liam Darmody, right now. For some reason, his account was flagged on LinkedIn as like an automated account. So he has no access to his desktop version of LinkedIn. It's his job. Like, he works in LinkedIn. So like the dependencies on those systems and the lack of resilience in
Mhm.
those systems is a huge part of sort of where my research is. So where I'm going with this is, when we come together and have those conversations, it peels back the vulnerability to a point where you start to realize your dependencies.
Yep.
And that's where resilience grows. That's where it starts, is recognition. If you're
Mhm.
dependent upon something like Rex's ranch, he has an invasive species called lantana,
Yeah.
right? That is like, he's got to eradicate that invasive species. So he doesn't want to spray, because that's not good, right? So you start to take inventory of all of these things. And that vulnerability piece and the dependencies piece is what creates that first layer of the onion to a human, where we sit uncomfortably in our awareness of our dependencies.
Yeah.
And that's so important in the regenerative process or in the circular economy, because you start to look at things like, oh my gosh, yeah, like the power goes out, right? We got people here that are 100 miles from me that won't have water until January. The storm was
Mhm.
41 days ago. You
Mhm.
want to talk about a dependency? Like, simple, clean water is
Yep.
a lifeline. We cannot live without
Mhm.
water.
That's right. As human beings, we cannot live.
In the disaster recovery planning for the hospitals, right? 3 days. They had power and diesel for their generators and water all backed up for 3 days, because disaster recovery was 3 days until the roads were washed out. So now the trucks couldn't deliver diesel and they couldn't bring in more potable water because the roads were gone. So those systems were out. So that dependency was gone. 3 days became 10. They had to close the hospital. Doctors couldn't scrub in. Nurses couldn't wash hands. Patients had to be distributed. So like, dependencies and vulnerability they go hand in hand. And when we just sit and listen to the sage on the stage, when we listen to the subject matter expert tell us, my dad used to say when he was alive, you should never have to reach down to shake someone's hand.
Nope.
And the sage on the stage that has experience from 20 years ago, to me, have a level of respect for their success, but I don't necessarily, I need to know more about their work in order to be a subject matter expert.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't think that people who are making a speech for a living are the people to sit down and have those conversations with. You've seen these keynotes come in, man. They fly in, they crush it on stage,
Yep.
and they usher out. And there's a second one in 3 hours on the other side of town, right? And no disrespect, but that format is not what we're talking about either. So let me back up.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because when we first talked, back when I was like, I literally jumped off the ladder without a parachute.
I remember I was in San Francisco when you did that.
And one of the things was, I think I'm going to do a lot of this sort of public speaking keynote. And it became very apparent to me that is not where I'm supposed to be for that exact reason. Because can you do it? I can do it. You can do it. Like, I can crush it. Like, it's not to minimize what they do, but yes, I could do. But like, that's not, I don't want to do that. I want to roll my sleeves up. I want to get in the weeds. I want to hand out tissues. I want to have my own tissues. I want to, try to figure this out. And that was where we early on very quickly learned my superpower is in workshops, is in training, is in awareness. It's not being a sage on the stage. It is really being on a guide on the side. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the conference that I envision, right? And that's why I want to get these people together in the same room.
Yeah.
I want to get you and me and Rex and Jonathan. We're already in the same room. We're all having conversations. And there's other people that we don't have to mention here, because a lot of the people that I've talked to that I'm coaching have their job that is part of an extractive system that they're very uncomfortable in. They're very unhappy in. They don't like their industry, or they don't like their boss, or they don't like the concept. There's no purpose. There's no mission. Wherever they are psychologically in themselves in that position, that reach out to me every day and say, I need help. Like, that's where they start with their vulnerability. The work I do, and then when I come home and sit around the dinner table, the conversations I have, I can't be adding to the problem at work and then concerned about the problem when I get home.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we have to come up with a format. We have to come up with a conference. This was my post on top of your post yesterday.
Yep.
Was my curious emoji saying, where is there a place in North America that can be outdoorsy, because that's me, can be workshoppy, because that's you, can be inclusive, because that's you, and can bring together all the smart people that Jonathan's working on and the program that Rex and Jonathan are working on, for us to be mind, body, and spirit in numbers. And I think it's about 200. I would like to try to pull off about 200 people.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we could do meaningful workshops of 50 people. Like, if we had 150 people that were attendees, and 50 people that were a part of the event, for a total of 200 people, could we moderate workshops of 50 people?
Yes.
Okay. Because that's the number that I threw that out there. I've never, 50
you need
to me.
facilitators.
20 is the most I've ever done.
No, you absolutely can. You need a main facilitator. And Rex would know this too. You need a main facilitator. You need a couple of co-facilitators or plants, like people that you can lean on to sort of help, sort of micro breakout conversations to make sure people are on track. But you absolutely can. Most of the time, when I'm doing workshops in higher ed specifically, like Northeastern, there's usually 40 or 50, sometimes 60 people in a room. And so there are absolutely ways you do it. It's a little bit of a different tactic, but no, I think you absolutely can have that level with very meaningful conversation. You can't do it in 50 minutes.
No. It's a 2-day. It's a 2-day, at least 2-day. It's not unlike the same format, just out of a conference center.
Yeah.
Out of the big numbers into something that has nature, to walk outside. Like, the breakouts have to be the breaks have to be as intentional as the workshops.
Yeah.
Where it's like, no, we're taking a break, but you're going for a walk. You're going outside. Like I say that almost every one of my posts that's a video is, I hope you get outside today. So it has to be like a summer campy kind of like, rustic luxury, nice, but like, and there, I don't want people, I want to capture people. Rex's place isn't big enough. My place, Retreat at Firefly Farm's not big enough. And I mean, people are spending like people are going to Cornet, they're spending like $5,000 or more.
Mhm.
So,
Get them to Vermont.
well, I got a ton of responses, great responses on LinkedIn. And I started a little collection on my web browser, and I'm going to grab them all in there. But I think it's something we need to do, Kelly. I think we need to be more intentional about putting this together for the spring, because it's emergent. And what better time to take inventory of the work that we've done all year long than the end of fall through winter?
Mm-hmm.
That's when you plan.
That's right.
So, we need to figure out those stakeholders that we talked about today. And I'm sure you have some more folks in the back of your head.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't do it without money.
No.
So we have to get sponsors, and people have to get paid.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest challenge is coming up with those dollars, finding the people who are okay investing heavily in the outcome, because that's what you guys are doing right now, right? You're taking and reporting out the Target. Like,
yeah.
there's a deliverable at the end.
But I think it's more than investing in the outcome. I think that people need to invest in the journey without the guarantee of an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, there will be an outcome, and even this outcome that we're working on, that Katie DePito and I are working on with Jonathan from this thing in September, even that is like, I wouldn't even consider that an outcome. Like, that's just a report out of information that we can then use to continue on the journey to DC, to real meaningful change, right? So, it's almost like we have to get people unattached to the idea that there needs to be a solution, and get people attached to the desire of being an explorer and actually wanting to go on the journey without any guarantee of something on the backside.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where in the conversations I have with people, that's uncomfortable. Just as a society, there's not a lot of people that collectively are like, yeah, let's just get in the car and drive, and nowhere to where I'm going, I'm just going to go, right? People don't want that. They want to have a stopping point. Like, I'm going to start here and I'm going to get here. It's the same reason why we've got some individuals that are saying, if you follow this 6-step playbook, you're going to have a neuro-inclusive environment. And it's like, no, you won't, because it's still going to fail 50% of the time, because humans are complicated and complex. And whatever you build to some individual is going to be a failure. And that is what people, I think, get hung up on, because they want the journey, and we need to educate them that the actual prize is the journey. That's what you're investing in. You're not investing in the outcome of the journey. That is going to happen. It's like the place conversation. We're going to have the place conversation there, but we're just not there yet. So it's like, you can't say, well, come to this or do this or invest in this. Like, even with the workshops that I do, let me do a 2.5-hour workshop on anxiety and get people to understand when we're talking about anxiety and the impact to human beings. You're not going to leave that workshop and be like, I have a gold star, I know all things anxiety. No, you have a level of awareness because you've gone on a journey that you're going to need to continue to go on after our time is over. And I think we need to sensationalize the benefit of exploring in the journey and not the outcome.
I love that. And that's absolutely what brings us to the work that has to be done, is that it's all what I consider multiplicative. when we add up all these things, we get these results, and we add that up, and then we add that up, and we take that into consideration, we break that down. It's absolutely a journey. And you absolutely can sit down and solve for whatever. Like, I want to see if the Earth's not flat. Well, okay, sail to the edge. I want to see what's west. Lewis and Clark. Okay. They thought they were going to encounter dinosaurs on the other side of the Mississippi River because they had never been to the other side of the Mississippi River. I mean, dinosaurs were gone like 20 million years earlier, but they didn't know what they were going to face. And they made it all the way to the West Coast. And we made it around the Earth, believe it or not. Even the climate deniers that think that the Earth is flat. It's not. It's round.
It's round.
So, you know, you can have that exploration and that journey to a destination. And you can monitor, record, and validate your way along that path. And you can get to outcome. But you have to be intentional about everything that we just said along the way. And to take a conference and an experience at a conference and not question it would be ridiculous. So I applaud you for your courage, because those are your people, and it is your industry, and it's my industry, and they're my people. And they're all saying the same thing to me that they're saying to you, maybe in your DMs. You know, they're not calling and saying, hey, I know you know Kelly, and oh my gosh, did you see what she posted? No, they're calling and saying, I missed you at Cornet, and I think I know why you didn't go. And then they ask about a technology conference, because they want to know what's going on over there. Because you can't be in multiple places at one time. But the approach to place has to go through people and platform
First.
It has to. And we're bifurcated, and there's always going to be placemakers, and they have value, tremendous value. When you need a place, you need a place.
But right now, they can go to the beach and have a margarita, because we got work to do over here.
Right now, they can go to the beach and have a margarita.
A margarita.
Wicked pissa. Well, Kelly, that's a perfect spot to stop, because we could probably go on for days and days and days. And I already know the M question, right? Maestro, Maverick, or Misfit. So we don't need to go into that. I've just got a Misfit folder for all the 3 podcasts that we've had, and we'll have 10 more. Let's follow up on this. Let's follow up with Rex. Let's follow up with Jonathan. Let's explore this conference. Let's explore trying to put 150 immaculate humans in one building. My work at the university level with Virginia Tech and App State and the Department of Energy and the NREL and the regenerative movement, I will get those people. They will come for sure. So I think that it'll be a really, really interesting conversation around resilient communities, dependencies, thinking differently, questioning things, and we'll see what emerges from it.
Let's go on a journey, man.
I'm here for it. Kelly, you rock. Keep up the good work. Hopefully, someone will go out there and hear what we're talking about and hear what we're doing. You know, we're both open for work, as they say on LinkedIn, because there's so much going on in here and in there. We got to get this stuff out and recorded. So thank you for your time, Kelly.
Thank you.